Together we stand, alone we fall. For a bank that operates in so many markets, just like HSBC, serving as many demographics of consumers is not the only important thing. Ensuring a diverse supply chain in order to mitigate and be resilient against geopolitical turmoils and any other unexpected circumstances is key. So today's strategy will uncover how we can succeed together and get things done with HSBC through increasing diversity in their supply chain and revolutionizing how supply chain inclusion is done. Today, we are riddled with the question of how can HSBC sustain and balance efficiency while diversifying supply chain across borders? We are driven by two key insights, which is that diversity is not only what is shown. It is not only about skin color or race or ethnicity, as is previously explored. Diversity grows from the root. Secondly, we recognize the need to balance efficiency and diversity as part of the supply chain in order to maintain the quality of services that HSBC can deliver to its customers. Our strategy, HSBC Grow, will help HSBC increase diversity within a supply chain and redefine what diversity looks like, going beyond the external factors and going into internal factors. Good afternoon, judges and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, as well as all the audience. We are Kaizen crew from Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University, Japan. My name is Katerina from Indonesia, and with my teammates, Nandini from India, Tara from Myanmar, and Ibrahim from Pakistan, we are beyond excited to walk you through, firstly, through our analysis by Nandini.
The case question that we will be focusing on today is how can HSBC sustain efficiency while diversifying supply chain across borders? We know that HSBC is a diverse company known for its dual heritage, not only spread across in 58 countries and territories, but also diverse from within, with having 66.6% diverse employees and also a 7.8% increase in women's senior leadership roles since 2024. We also know that what HSBC is looking for from its suppliers, that is 51% of owned and operated operations by underprivileged or underrepresented groups, and also their focus on net zero ambition. All in all, with an inclusion of minority. So diversity does not only come from within or out, but it comes from all around. And our mission is to take it forward with our suppliers. By leveraging the core competencies of HSBC, which is not only the global reach and connectivity, the dominant position in its two home markets, and the $3 trillion total asset of 2024, which is keeping our stakeholders happy, but how can we leverage it? By having a global reach, we have innovative ideas from different perspectives. With our strong and dominant position, we have strong foundational pillars. And with our $3 trillion asset, we have financial stability. Being a well-established company, we are making way forward for the SMEs. So, using the cases given to us at hand, the two options that were given, this CV racks and the onboarding application, looking deep down, from the first option, we can see that it's relatively generic and lower supply risk, whereas compared to the onboarding app in India, which pose a lot of regulatory uncertainty. Seeing that, the SME and marginalized individuals we have analyzed that have less education and mentorship that prevents them from reaching their true potential. Moving forward, if HSBC wants to diversify its supply chain as per their standards, they must help the SME grows. So with a little push and their help, we can all go a long way. Now let's see what our strategy has to offer.
So our strategy, HSBC Grow, is comprised of one short-term and one long-term part that can help HSBC grow by choosing the right vendors for the right project and help potential SMEs with great potential and diversity grow with HSBC help. For the short-term strategy, my colleague Tadar will walk you through it.
The very first part of our strategy is to make sure that we select the right people to make the things done with HSBC. So in what way are we going to help HSBC to grow and to find their perfect suppliers? So today, our key considerations for now is to find a diverse suppliers for HSBC in 2 different countries, Singapore and India. We understand that when we are thinking about SMEs to get involved in our systems, we have to think about some selection criteria. We have to think about how integracy, how much they are doable, how much they are capable to meet our standards. At the same time, according to the HSBC value, we also have to consider how diverse they are. So, leveraging currently, we already know that HSBC has a very good systems defining HSBC suppliers diversity. So leveraging already existed HSBC supplier diversity portal, we want to make sure something that could bring more valuable to HSBC core and that could define diversity in a better way. So we propose you HSBC integrated supplier database that could not only be used in a short term, but also providing a database for your long-term sustained growth. So we understand that currently we have got industry, market, employees, geographic scope, and we let the suppliers declare their ownership's diversity. But we are going to add a few on to make a better definitions of diversity, which is diversity in terms of employees and diversity in terms of backgrounds, and include the HSBC metric, making sure that we make a new definition that meets HSBC value and can make HSBC work then. So there are 3 things that we are going to add on. The very first one, employees. Now we understand that HSBC let the suppliers to declare their ownership in their operations, in their executive members. But the very root of the systems is the employees. In what way are employees diversified? In terms of their race, in terms of their colors, in terms of what way our employees are diversified. And we also understand that diversity could be an external thing, like our color, our nationality, our gender. But however, as the root of the diversity, it's come from the internal. Some things that we have never considered, like the background, the educations. We, 4 peoples, came from the different countries with different backgrounds and different education systems. Our ability to speak English, our ability to be on this stage comes from different factors, not only in the ways of colors and nationality, but also in the ways of how much the systems of our country supported us. So in this way, we want to put another matrix in the diversifying, which is education and the background. The last part of our addition is making sure that HSBC has got its own metrics that can define diversity. So we know that HSBC value is, they really value on diversity, make sure that people are inclusive, and also, most importantly, HSBC want things to be done. So in the scales of integracies, how work done, how much our suppliers are responsible, and also making sure that our metrics not only measure the external diversity, but also the internal and sense diversity of us. By taking this HSBC metrics to our problems, which is defining the vendors and choosing the vendors, we would like to choose Collab and FET out of the 4 companies we are given in the ways of integrity, in the ways of diversity. So making sure that by using all of 3 additional supports in our systems, we will make sure that we can bring HSBC to another level with a better efficiency and also with the better meanings of diversity. So to sum up the very first part of the strategy, we make HSBC integrated supplier database, make the robust portals, and we make sure that we have got another definition that could bring HSBC values and efficiency. Now, Kat, can you please explain the another part of our strategy?
Of course. Thank you, Tadar. So now we know that. So now HSBC knows who to choose for what project. What happens when HSBC identifies a small to medium enterprise with large potential, but is not quite there yet in terms of capability. This is why we present to you our second part of the strategy, HSBC Incubate, to help SMEs grow together with HSBC. So, circling back to our consumer, HSBC, a global bank serving a multitude amount of region with 4 business segments and various needs, starting from procurement of digital technology, human capital, as well as client services. They strive to create a resilient supply chain while focusing on their main focuses to digitize, energize, transition, while also increasing diversity within their operations. They're riddled with 2 problems, 2 key pain points. Firstly, how do we define diversity, which my colleague Thadar has already touched upon, that diversity must not only be the external factors of what we can identify as, but also how we got there, the history of how the people got there and how they got it, and how they came into the position, as well as balance between capability, ensuring that suppliers can meet the regulations and standard that HSBC requires, while also prioritizing diversity. The key rationale to the second part of our strategy is the grassroots approach. When discussing about diversity, when discussing about diversity and marginalized communities, it is important to recognize that systemic barriers prevent them from achieving more and gaining more skill. In this case, SMEs, while having potential and the ideas, often lack access to mentorship, growth infrastructure, and capability growing opportunities that prevent them from reaching the standards and capabilities that big clients such as HSBC would require. Thus, we believe that in order to grow capabilities of SMEs, an underrepresented minority within their supplier database, HSBC needs to help tackle the lack of access to this growth. With the principle of circularities, where HSBC will help connect SMEs with great potential and are diverse, connect them with mentors as well as growth opportunities, as well as provide them with their first tender, HSBC can then receive a discounted rate of around 80%, as well as a priority clause that puts HSBC as first priority for a certain amount of time above other clients, meaning that even if they currently do not have any active tender, if at some point within the period of time HSBC approaches the SME to conduct a project, the SME would have to prioritize HSBC first before catering to other clients. Of course, these as star SMEs, as we would call them, would also have to align with HSBC's values on diversity and inclusion. And how it will look like is very much similar to what HSBC already has right now. First, by finding the potential SMEs through the developed HISD. Next, by supporting them, by connecting them with opportunities and mentorship. And lastly, by partnering with them, by offering to them their first tender and the exclusivity period. In doing this, SMEs with great potential in different regions get access to growth, has a more level playing field, and receives their maybe first major client, as we see with FET. For HSBC, they receive a discounted rate and a customizable approach, supply chain resilience by establishing connection and loyal relationships with suppliers all around across the world, and maintains their robust diversity metrics. Meanwhile, for other stakeholders, such as venture incubators that HSBC may partner with, the mentors, and other enterprises that may be in a non-competing market, this can allow them to establish partnership opportunities. While for the customer, it creates secure service and quality maintenance all throughout the regions. So, all this, the 2 parts of our strategy, create a bulletproof supply chain that is made feasible by HSBC global reach, supply chain availability all across the world, and HSBC financial prowess, as my colleague Nandini has already outlined their core competencies. So, now that we've outlined what our strategy is, my colleague Ibrahim will outline how we will do it and all the associated risks and benefits.
Thank you. Now that we know the what's and how's of our strategy, let's look at when we're going to be implementing it. Starting from the third quarter of 2025, we make sure we make changes to our incubation program that we already have. We make sure not only are these changes made, we properly communicate it to the SMEs that have submitted their tender offers. Secondly, we make sure we have our own incubation program developed in-house. And if not, we can reach out to a venture incubation firm, have other SMEs on board. Lastly, we develop a feedback loop. Make sure not only are these SMEs on board, we are catering our own needs to what it may be in this long run. However, HSBC's goal isn't just to grow, it's to be resilient in the long term. And to make sure our own strategy was resilient, we have considered some risks and mitigation strategies. Firstly is the regulatory pressure. Considering HSBC operates all across the globe, it is very common that it comes under regulatory pressures. Also considering the fact that SMEs themselves are very used to the culture at home, their cultural differences, or for example, them coming on board immediately, they may simply not operate as to how they were back home. Simply conducting due diligence, having an in-house team or an in-house person supervising the whole process, and making sure there's a gradual integration process for them to our own strategy, and that they're used to what HSBC is, we can simply mitigate these risks. However, over the very long term, we have also made sure not only are we prioritizing some SMEs for the growth potential, we don't cannibalize the SMEs or the suppliers that we have right now. And in order to not cannibalize them right now, we have a clear non-compete clause in the contracts that we have right now. Or in the very long term, we make sure the suppliers that we have right now are on board, have the same mission as us, and are simply cooperative going over the very long board. However, to bring this our own strategy to fruition, we've allocated around $100 million budget, allocating around 70% of it to CapEx expenses such as the incubation programs or the software changes that we may occur, and the 30% of it going towards operational and miscellaneous expenses. We have also made sure that our own logistical expenses are covered for in part in the CapEx and in the long term over the operational expenses. Moving forward, the big question is, now that we know what we're investing, what returns does HSBC have? Firstly, we make sure from the $32 billion HSBC has made just in 2024, we grow to around $39 billion, assuming a base CAGR of 10%. We've also done a scenario analysis, which we'll be more than happy to explain as we go forward. The key drivers of our revenue or the HSBC's growth itself will be, firstly, its global presence. Secondly, the incubator program, making sure we're going for companies that are in the growth stage of their company cycle or their product cycle and not at the maturity stage. Moving forward, we've also assumed some base CAGR scenarios, which are more than happy to explain. Firstly, assuming a base scenario of just 10%, we've calculated a per vendor revenue on Singapore and India, which are our two priority markets, and the tender offers we have from. Making sure that we use these markets and these vendors that we have tender offers from as springboard to have other SMEs in the very same country, maximizing not only the revenues from these very tenders, but also making sure all other SMEs are incorporated into our SMEs. That being said, we're now at the end of our presentation, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions.
Time's up. We may now start the 15 minutes Q&A section. Judges, please.
Hello. That was very good. Thank you. I want to understand a little bit more. So you said in the short term you'd select FET and Collab for the different ones. Can you just walk me through how you got to those two different decisions?
Definitely. Thank you for your question. The reason why we decided to choose those two in the first part was because in the server project, if I may, we noticed that it's posing lower supplier risk and is generic, which is why we decided to go with the SME, whereas the onboarding app has much more regulatory uncertainty, which is why we decided to go with the big company, the Collab technology.
In addition, we believe that Collab would be able to match the app's requirement for its intricacies because it is a client-facing application. So we believe that it should be much more detailed and we believe that Collab's capacity as a larger enterprise than Zippy would be more suitable for the kind of project that is intricate. While FET, because for server racks, their standards are already designed, we believe that it would be much more feasible for them to appropriately match the standards while also giving them that opportunity as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thought it was very concise and succinct. Two questions from me. I find it very interesting that you've introduced two extra metrics to kind of, I think, widen the definition of what diversity constitutes. And I think your backgrounds and the countries that you're from are a very good insight into that, right? I know that we have ethnicity and whatnot, but a lot of it is tied with economic background. So that's very helpful. But do we think about how it works backwards? Would you then have to you have to add back that metric to our entire supplier database chain, and that creates in itself, I think, a review of whether or not they meet. And I wonder if you thought that through, because we're looking forward, but how that works kind of backwards. The second question is, it's a very thoughtful approach to the incubator. And so you're saying that this is supposed to run alongside the decisions that you have made? Okay. How do we factor the resources that would take to run this and the 100 million that you've put to this? What does it deliver in terms of, are there any metrics in terms of lifting the performance and how it's going to, what's the point A to point B of the incubator? Otherwise, it's a very cost-oriented initiative approach that I suppose kind of is a bit distracting, because I need to understand where the end goal is and how it lifts the entire diversity of supply chain. Thanks.
Of course. Thank you so much for your question. To just clarify for the first part is, if the new matrices will change how we look at diversity right now, if I understood that correctly. And the second part of your question would be, what would be basically the endpoint of incubation, and to what extent the incubation would be, if I understand that correctly. Okay, thank you. First of all, yes, we did consider how this would affect how we look diversity currently. However, we believe that in a journey to change history, it's not the history that we need to change, but it's how we look at the history that it needs to change. While it may or may not, while it may affect what diversity is currently defined as in HSBC, considering HSBC goal is to be more nuanced in diversity, we believe that that is a non-financial cost that HSBC has to absorb in order to reach its goals in becoming the truly diverse company HSBC would like to be. Secondly, the end goal of the incubation program would be somewhat of an internship. So as students looking for internships ourselves, we know that companies look for interns to help these students know more about the company and basically cater themselves to what the company wants and to become an employee that the company would want to work for them. So our concept and key principle with the incubation program is pretty much the same. By interacting and outreaching to these small, medium enterprises and providing them the opportunity to grow, we want them to have HSBC first in their mind in terms of client and loyalty, and develop solutions that are firstly premierly developed for HSBC. Doing so, HSBC has access to the newest and the latest technology, unwavering loyalty from these SMEs, as well as a continual availability for the suppliers across the markets. Thank you.
To add on to my colleague Kat, we also defined diversity not only in the ways of we show to the other people, in a way that HSBC see a person, okay, we diversify them in terms of colors, race, or the way that they look, but also we give a message from HSBC that we understand the difficulties you have come through, we understand your background, we understand the limited education that you might have offered, you might have obtained. However, HSBC is still a place that welcomes everybody into be our inclusive systems, and we move forward and carrying the values of HSBC and making the job done at the end. So I think the definitions of putting a matrix is to give a message, a more deliverable, a greater message of definition in terms of diversity.
Hi, thank you, everybody. So, finance guy here. So I'm inevitably going to first ask you a financy question. You've talked a lot about the outcomes that we could perhaps realize through these programs, but how would you think about the benefits, perhaps, if I'm a shareholder of HSBC? How am I benefiting from all of this expenditure, from all of this effort, and from all of this focus going into the diversity agenda? And then a second question, can you maybe have a think about what risks some SMEs participating in the program you've outlined might face as a result, and how you think about mitigating those for the SMEs?
Hello? Okay. Thank you for your question. If I'm just understanding your question correctly, secondly is about the risks SMEs face. And the first question, if you could please clarify.
So just in terms of the financial case for the 100 million expenditure.
Okay, perfect. And what the stakeholders have in it. Thank you. There were two key rationales behind the whole scenario of the financials, because we first had to identify what HSBC was looking for and what their future goals were. And they were going towards a more diverse future. However, in doing so, there was this crossroad of whether it was diversity or it was efficiency. Since they were going for young SMEs who were not as efficient, they were facing the risks of just falling behind some competitors. In doing so, what we did was we not risk-weighted, but we just took a ratios of the vendors that we have in total. And since we were given the total revenues of some countries, we coupled them together to get the APAC's total revenues. We then weighted them against the whole world and then took out Singapore and India specifically. In doing so, the whole idea was, how can we use Singapore's and the tender offers we have from these specific countries and use that as springboard to expand HSBC's reach, which they already have. And so in doing so, we were going from around 4 million per vendor in those specific countries to around 5 million if we were to assume a base case. And we didn't calculate the earnings per share, but our base assumption was, even in the worst case scenario, we were still going in a positive incremental revenue just based off of our strategy.
And if I could add on to my colleague Ibrahim's, in terms of what this gives to the shareholders, we believe that the key principle here is security. We know that the market is very volatile, and we know that services all around the world is very susceptible to what is happening around the world, such as the COVID-19 pandemic or the current geopolitical tensions between the US and China. That could happen at any time, and the consequences would be dramatic and direct. So by creating this network of suppliers all over around the world and also diversifying its diversity within its ethnic and background, shareholders get security that no matter what happens, HSBC will stand, reducing the risk of HSBC taking sharp cuts like we know many companies do during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as ensuring the regional continuity of HSBC operations, no matter mitigating the risk of geopolitical consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. And anything on the second question? So just around what risks you perceive, perhaps, for SMEs participating in this program?
Of course. So the risk itself was HSBC's competencies. HSBC's core competencies, as we understood, was its broad network. And as an SME, one core competency you really need is to expand our relationships. Getting into perhaps the incubation period may isolate them from future relationships, or HSBC is simply competitors. So that was one risk, but in order to mitigate that in the very first place, our incubation program wasn't just about HSBC, it was about the SME's growth in the very first place. I hope that answers your question.
In addition, to mitigate that on a technical matter, the exclusivity contract is only for about 1 year. So after that, they would be able to engage with other clients as they would wish, therefore mitigating the risk of the complete isolation that my colleague Ibrahim mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Just want to move to the timeline. So I think there was one where it's the end of 2027. So a couple of questions on that. Number one, what do you see as success by the end of 2027? Did you ever think about what success looks like by the end of that journey? And then the second question is, where would you start on that journey? So we buy lots of things. Is there any particular areas of goods or services you would target first on that journey, or you would exclude?
Thank you. I'll be more than happy to answer the first part of your question, which is the end goal and where they will be in the future. Of course, HSBC's growth, as we understood from the case, wasn't just about the company itself. It's about the people it was working with. And so our end goal was for the people who get, or for the companies who get incubated into our program, we have a more loyal and resilient supply chain, first of all. Secondly, we have better relationships across the industry. And thirdly, in terms of the financials, we have more we cut down our costs from these very SMEs, and we increase their individual revenues per supplier that we had, which was around 4.2 million. And if we were to implement the strategy, which went up to 5 million. I hope that answers your first question.
And also aligning with the HSBC core values and what HSBC is already doing, which is fighting, supporting, and bringing toward to the growth. I believe that together with our strategies, we not only give a systems and operations and new systems where we could really find suitable persons, suitable diversity person into our systems, but also together with our educational support, we believe that HSBC, at the end of the year 2027, HSBC will be able to provide more insights, more help and support to the SMEs that they would be able to work together in the futures. And if you may have some, you can add on.
Okay, thank you. So by the end of 2027, we hope that HSBC will already be working on the first batch of the HSBC Incubate program attendees. So by that time, we believe that the SME incubatees will already be working or have already completed the first tender with HSBC, which allows us to again then measure how much we were able to help their growth and how that impacts diversity in terms of HSBC's supplier database.
And then just very quickly, but on the second question, so who are you going to target first and why?
Absolutely. So if we can go back to the key principle slide, we are targeting vendors whose market we are currently a major market in, so in Hong Kong and India, Singapore, and other markets where HSBC is already having a good amount of supplier. Because we are testing a redefinition of diversity, we believe that it is important to test this out in a market where HSBC's position is already secure. So as a plan B scenario, if the SME doesn't work out, HSBC is not in major risk of anything large. Furthermore, we also would firstly engage with vendors like FET that can engage with HSBC for firstly the lower risks project, therefore mitigating the risk of a major mess up as well as mitigating any external factors that could completely derail the consequences. So to answer your question, we plan to engage with vendors who are in markets where we are already strong in the supply relationship, and also approach with.
Thank you, the Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University. You may now come down the stage.